Good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you tuning in today, we welcome you in. We are starting off the book of Exodus. I've been looking forward to this for a bit. Not because Genesis is boring, far from it, but you get to introduce new people, new ideas, and it's just a fun thing to do. So, without any further ado, Exodus chapter 1. These are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob, each coming with his household: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah; Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin; Dan and Naphtali; Gad and Asher. The total number of persons that were of Jacob's issue came to 70, Joseph being already in Egypt. Joseph died, and all of his brothers and all that generation. But the Israelites were fertile and prolific. They multiplied and increased very greatly, so that the land was filled with them. A new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, "Look, the Israelite people are much too numerous for us. Let us deal shrewdly with them, so that they might not increase. Otherwise, in the event of war, they may join our enemies in fighting against us and rise from the ground." So they set taskmasters over them to oppress them with forced labor. And they built garrison cities for Pharaoh, Pithom, and Ramses. But the more they were oppressed, the more they increased and spread out, so that the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites. The Egyptians ruthlessly imposed upon the Israelites the various labors that they made them perform. Ruthlessly, they made their life bitter for them with harsh labor at mortar and bricks, with all sorts of tasks in the field. The king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah, saying, "When you deliver the Hebrew woman, look at the birth stool. If it is a boy, kill him. If it is a girl, let her live." The midwives, fearing God, did not do as the king of Egypt had told them, and they let the boys live. So the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and said to them, "Why have you done this thing, letting the boys live?" The midwives said to Pharaoh, "Because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. They are vigorous. Before the midwife can come to them, they have given birth." And God dealt well with these midwives, and the people multiplied and increased. And because the midwives feared God, he established households for them. Then the Pharaoh charged all of his people, saying, "Every boy that is born you shall throw into the Nile, but let every girl live." Pretty dark way to start off Exodus. Now, one thing that's always troubled me is it says a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. The Egyptians were wonderful record keepers. They had a very firm sense of their place in history and exactly what they had done. So when it says knew not Joseph, I'm going to infer that the Josephites and their influence had fallen out of favor. So none of them were in the inner circle. For whatever reason, this particular Pharaoh had kind of a grudge against them. It's very easy. They suck up to the elder son, he dies, and the younger son inherits the throne, and they remember that. So even though time has passed, realistically, to me, this is a political statement rather than just simply somebody who didn't know their history. The Pharaoh here is very stubborn. But the same token, he knows exactly the people he's dealing with. He's Pharaoh, for pity's sake. And whatever happened in the past, that debt has been paid in his mind. The whole thing about the midwives is a little bit strange because Pharaoh wouldn't gather the midwives together to talk to them. They would be a friend of a slave, of his co-regent, whatever it is. He would give that instruction out to them, but the book presents it as though it was a two-way dialogue. People also try to date this passage by saying that the cities were Pithom and Ramses. And Pharaoh Ramses, there's actually a couple of them, are pretty well known. But I posit this to you. Again, the Egyptians were fond of their histories, and while a lot of pharaohs named things after themselves, I would say that he's naming these cities after other people, because it does say they are garrison cities. In other words, places where his troops are intended to be. And Pharaoh Ramses, we know, is a pretty powerful guy. Pithom, that may be a language barrier. There's a lot of things that are happening there. But don't try to follow a straight line from there to say this was one of the Pharaoh Ramses who did this. No, that's a complete misnomer. But anyways, let's jump back into the text. Exodus chapter 2. A certain man of the house of Levi went and married a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw how beautiful he was, she hid him for 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she got a wicker basket for him and caulked it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child into it and placed it among the reeds by the bank of the Nile, and his sister stationed herself at a distance to learn what would befall him. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe in the Nile, while her maidens walked along the Nile. She spied the basket among the reeds and sent her slave girl to fetch it. When she opened it, she saw that it was a child, a boy crying. She took pity on it and said, "This must be a Hebrew child." And then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get you a Hebrew nurse to suckle the child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter answered, "Yes." So the girl went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child and nurse it for me, and I will pay your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed it. When the child grew up, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, who made him her son. She named him Moses, explaining, "I drew him out of the water." Some time after that, when Moses had grown up, he went out to his kinsfolk and witnessed their labors. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his kinsmen. He turned this way and that, and seeing no one about, he struck the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. When he went out the next day, he found 2 Hebrews fighting. He said to the offender, "Why do you strike your fellow?" He retorted, "Who made you chief and ruler over to us? Do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" Moses was frightened. He thought, "The matter is known." When Pharaoh learned of the matter, he sought to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh. He arrived in the land of Midian and sat down beside a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters. They had come to draw water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. But shepherds came and drove them off. Moses rose to their defense, and he watered their flock. When he turned to their father Reuel, he said, "How is it that you have come back so soon today?" They answered, "An Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds. He even drew water for us and watered the flock." He said to his daughters, "Where is he then? Why did you leave the man? Ask him in to break bread." Moses consented to stay with the man, and he gave Moses his daughter Zipporah as a wife. She bore a son whom he named Gershom, for he said, "I have been a stranger in a foreign land." A long time after that, the king of Egypt died. The Israelites were groaning under bondage and cried out, and their cry for help from bondage rose up to God. God heard their meaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. God looked upon the Israelites, and God took notice of them. So Levi, you might remember, was told, let's see, I can pull it up right here. Cursed be their anger so fierce, and their wrath so relentless. I will divide them in Jacob, scatter them in Israel. But here, born of the tribe of Levi, is Moses. Now, chapter 2 asks us to suspend a lot of disbelief. So let's just pretend, okay, the Pharaoh's daughter shows up one day with a kid. And the kid is obviously known to Pharaoh. No questions are asked. Okay, that's your kid. While it is true at that time that children were adopted by royal families, I mean, you have the whole Oedipus part where while he ran away from his mother and father, Jocasta, and I forget what his father's name is, and he was adopted into another royal family without question. And here we have the same thing. A child who is abandoned is adopted into a royal family. Although the ending is very different from Oedipus. This is arguably taking place a little earlier in the time frame. And yeah, so this Pharaoh's daughter, princess, I guess you would call her, a princess of Egypt, is so fascinated by the child, and it does say it's a pretty good-looking child. She finds the basket, claims it as her own, hires his own mother to look after him, so his mother's getting paid to look after her own kid. It's a pretty sweet deal, no matter how you look at it. And then later on, when Moses is big enough, probably, 10 years old, whenever Pharaoh's daughter decides the kid's old enough to be taken in. Because remember, babies and children are a pain in the butt. They are. They're crying, they poop themselves, they do all sorts of things. Pharaoh's daughter doesn't want to have any of that problems, especially if she can pay some Hebrew person to look after it for her. Fantastic. She'll pick up the kid when they're a bit older and teach them the essential parts of court life. How do we know that? Because we see when he kills the Egyptian, he's not punished. Even though all the Hebrews know that he did it, and they recognize him as being one of the royals. Even Pharaoh knows that he is one of the royals and punishes him as such. If he was a Hebrew slave, he would have just been hauled off and put in the docks and drowned, or whatever horrible tortures that the Egyptian Pharaoh could come up with. But Moses is able to escape and get himself a wife and a kid out of the deal. Pretty good. This is a guy that I'm going to the casino with. I'm just kidding on that one. It's trivializing things, but yeah, that's the chapter in a nutshell. Moses is born, grows up, has a couple adventures, and runs away, all in one chapter. This is the kind of thing that we would see in a montage in a modern day movie, but it manages to break things up very well. So we got Genesis chapter 1 and 2. Moses is already showing he has this Batman complex and he doesn't like to see injustice, and he's willing to flee into the night. So let's see what our Batman does next in the next episode. We wish to thank you for joining us for the Silverlight Show. If you enjoyed this show, please like, share, subscribe, buy the books listed in the link below. The ebooks are available for 99 cents, which is less than the cost of a cup of coffee per day. And if you want to get a hold of us, you can reach us on Twitter at Silverlight Live. That's at Silverlight Live, all one word. The comments below are always open and welcoming to any comments. And we hope you have a fantastic day.